My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP. I have the pleasure of co-hosting most of these weekly Next Practices weekly events. I'm usually from my home in Rochester, New York. Today I'm on the road because I'm going to be participating in our Chief Learning and Talent Officer Board here at Intuitive in Santa Clara, California. I have the lovely setup here in my hotel room with the nuclear force of the sun bearing down on me, so my video looks a little different than it usually does. I'm joined today by my colleague and co-host, Marshall Bergmann, our Vice President of Advisory Services. Good morning, Marshall.
Nice to see you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
You'll be leading the conversation with our special guest, who we'll bring on in just a moment, but a few other quick announcements. As the name implies, this is Next Practices Weekly. You see we've got some outstanding guests coming up from Spire Global, PwC, and Booking.com on September 19th, September 26th, and October 3rd, so make sure those are all on your calendar. Also wanted to note that we do meet once a year as a big HR community at our Next Practices Now conference. This year, coming up in 2025, it'll be March 3rd through the 6th, so a little bit earlier in the month of March than we usually meet. If you register by November 15th, you can save $300. So if you're considering registering for that conference, as many have already done, do so before November 15th to have that savings. And the big announcement this week is we are unveiling for the first time our first batch of 10 speakers for the conference. We hadn't done this on previous Next Practices Weeklies. You see here, we've got Peter Capelli from the Wharton School. We've got HR leaders from Atlassian, Visa, Microsoft, Lumen, and others. This is just the first batch of speakers. Of course, there'll be many more. We usually have 25 or 30 outstanding speakers ranging from book authors and thought leaders to CEOs, CHROs, other functional heads of HR from great companies. So no expo at this conference. If you're not familiar with it, there's no trade show, no expo, no vendors there, just a private space for about 500 HR leaders to gather and learn from each other. We're going to be talking some about culture today, so I also wanted to reiterate that we've done a lot of work on culture. It's sort of what we most hang our hat on in terms of studies at I4CP. We did a major study called Culture Renovation back in 2018 or 2019. That led to a book by our CEO, Kevin Oakes, also called Culture Renovation. We did a major study a few years later, Culture Fitness. You can download the materials for that at our website. And Marshall, you came aboard more recently than that as our VP of Advisory Services, and I know a lot of your focus has been on culture. Say just a couple of words on what you do in that role.
Yeah, so as a Vice President of Advisory Services, my role is to help organizations who are members, or even organizations who aren't members, implement all of our research in their organization. So if you need a helping hand, from a very light touch from advisory services to you need a whole team of folks to help you build a culture scorecard or help you align your leadership team around new purpose, values, behaviors, we're here to help. And at the end of the day, what we do is we leverage our research and bring it to life in your organization, help you drive business results. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. I know you've had some really interesting interactions with members and non-member companies both since joining and launching this new advisory services here at I4CP. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Marshall, to introduce and lead the conversation with our special guest today.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us from all across the world. And thank you very much, Jen Vanderwall, for joining us. Jen is the Chief People and Culture Officer of Capitolis. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of Jen's background, and then we're just going to get into a really interesting conversation around the amazing work that Jen is doing at Capitolis. So first off, I just want to say today is especially fun for me because while Jen is an awesome HR professional, she's also a personal friend. We've known each other for, 20, 25 years now, Jen. It's been terrific. Yeah. I've just watched her career grow and blossom and her just do some really amazing things. So I'm really excited that she was able to find the time to join us today. And I'm really excited to share her story and the story of her business together with you all. A little bit of background around her. As a Chief People Officer of Capitolis, she spearheads organizational growth, leadership development, and creating a dynamic culture. She's an expert at organizational design, ensuring the right leaders in the right roles, and she's passionate about building strong cultures, like probably all of us here on this call, especially around, I think, what's really important, defining common language, clear standards, and making integrated systems to foster the desired behaviors. Jen joined Capitolis from Bridgewater Associates, where she held positions in human resources and talent, and also served as Chief Operating Officer, Technology Strategy and Incubation. leading all aspects of financial management, department operations, and talent management. And prior to Bridgewater, she was at another amazing company, MasterCard Worldwide, where she was part of that transformation. And she served as vice president of prepaid products, leading the global product organization responsible for driving electronic payments and processes in the commercial and healthcare industries. So it seems like, Jen, you've done a lot more than I have in the last 25 years. I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed, but why don't we get into your story? So, a lot of folks I'm sure everyone knows about MasterCard, and anyone who's interested in corporate culture probably knows a lot about Bridgewater, but many of them probably haven't heard about Capitolis yet. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the business and a little bit about you?
Sure. Thanks, Marshall. This will be fun. I can tell. I like your style already. This is going to be fun. So Capitolis, we still call ourselves a fintech startup. I'm here in New York City. We have offices also in Tel Aviv and London. And I say we still call ourselves a startup because we're about 8 years old now and have moved pretty closely into the scope and scale phase of our growth. We're very excited about what that's going to be looking like. It looks like this year, next year, and beyond. There are two main aspects of our business you can see on the slide. One is called portfolio optimization. We partner with our clients who are financial institutions, and we're helping them compress their trades, compress their portfolios, and find efficiencies there. And on the right-hand side, you see what we call capital marketplace. And this is largely, there's a business need after all of the regulation coming out of 2008 and so on, where banks don't have enough capital that's free to service all of the customer demand that they have. And so the business that we have built and continue to test products in this space and launch them brings together those financial institutions that need that capital with the investors that have excess capital to meet those needs and enable them to service more and more products and more of their customers. We have a little over 120 employees now, and you can see on the right-hand side, we're backed by a number of VCs. We're also backed by a number of our clients and large banks and financial institutions, which is really interesting and really great for us.
Fantastic. So fintech business, growing, complicated. Sounds like lots of really smart people in your office day to day. Does that sound about right, Jen?
Yeah, it's moving fast. It's moving fast.
All right. So let's shift gears a little bit, moving from the business now. Let's talk a little bit about you, because there's lots of folks on this call who either are in a role similar to yours or hoping to get into that role of that CPO role or that CHRO role. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to this role? Tell us a little bit about where you came from, what your experience was, and some lessons you learned that helped you get here.
Yeah. So I don't know if I should share this, but I graduated college 30 years ago this year. And so I'll summarize it by decade. The first 2 decades of my career, I would describe as general business. I started in where I met your wife long ago, and had kind of a leadership development rotational program at an insurance company. I went into consulting for a number of years. It was HR related consulting, so I kind of got my footing there on this part of the business. I left there and went to MasterCard, who was my client. So you see all these kind of organic connections that happen between role and role, and started there as the head of global benefits, which was what I was doing consulting around. But within about 18 months, I used to call it pulled to the dark side. I guess it's the dark side again for me. I got pulled over to move into product group and actually start a new product organization at MasterCard focused on healthcare payments. I ended up spending about 5 or 6 years in product development at MasterCard, kind of in this organic growth way. And I was lucky that I had mentors and executive sponsors that believed in me and kind of pulled me from role to role and company to company over time. About a decade ago, I guess it was probably more like 12 to 15 years ago, I came to a crossroads in my career. And I realized that I didn't really have an intention or a plan around the rest of my career and what I really wanted to do. To that time, I had mostly been focused on learning, and I wanted to manage larger teams and try new things and test different industries. But I guess it was about 12 years ago, I sat back at MasterCard and I thought, what am I good at? What differentiates me from the people that are around me? How do I like to spend my day? What are the books that are on my bookshelf that I'm reading on the weekends? And I got a lot of feedback from a lot of people on that as well. So it wasn't just from me, it was from others that were around me. And I, through that process, realized I'm obsessed with people and culture in the context of business. And by the way, I always was. Like when I took on a larger team, for example, at MasterCard or in consulting, of course, I needed to understand the goals and how the business was doing and all of the basics, the metrics, et cetera. But about 5 seconds later, I was diving into what's the org design, who are the people, who are the strongest, where are their needs, all that stuff. And I kind of thought that all leaders were that way. I thought that everyone did that. So at this realization, I basically course corrected, or I should say doubled down on people and culture. Bridgewater Associates, for folks especially in the Northeast or even globally who are familiar with that firm, had been calling me. And I think they had been calling lots of people because they have a big pipeline that goes into a very small pool of candidates that they accept and hire. And so they had been calling me for years and leaving a voicemail. And at that point, culture, man, like if I'm going to learn about culture, I might as well like go right straight to the source and experience that. And I thought I would go there for 2 years and swim in that really amazing place and experience that radical culture. And I ended up staying for 8. Which might be a more interesting part of the conversation. I ended up staying for 8. I left there in the summer of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and I launched an executive coaching business and an HR advisory business. And long story short, search firms, maybe there are some talent acquisition professionals on the phone, kept calling me and tricking me and saying, hey, we'd love to have you calibrate our head of people, just talk to the CEO. And so I never turned down a conversation with the CEO. I met many CEOs then, and one of the CEOs I met is the man that I'm working for now, Gail Mandelzies. And I kind of knew within the first 5 or 10 minutes that we shared a lot of the same values. And I could hear his thinking kind of anchoring to the higher principle level in terms of how he was thinking about his business and the importance of people within it. So I have been the chief people and culture officer here for about 3.5 years now.
Wow. I mean, so many things to unpack, Jen. I feel like I could have a whole conversation about 5 or 6 different topics. I even noticed Natalie in the chat wrote regarding your comment around you were interested in the metrics, but you really wanted to focus on how the people get the work done. Said we need more leaders to be that way. And I know we didn't prep for this question, but I'm curious. Like sometimes I have that same instinct, right? You and I think are cut from the same cloth, and like we love the people aspect. I always joke when I was getting my MBA at NYU, I was the only person in the leadership classes. Everyone was in the finance and portfolio management classes, right? And there was crickets in the leadership development classes. Did you ever feel like that was risky to be interested in the people side of things and not go for the hard business side of things? Or did you feel like they complemented? Just curious. I just came up as we were thinking about that.
This is a good question. And I'll get into it's one of the reasons I love executive coaching, because I hope I can help people figure this out earlier than it took me, right? Till the age of probably 40, till I sat back and thought through this. The first 20 or so years of my career, I had my MBA in finance. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do. I was making more money, managing bigger teams, working at great companies, all of those things. So it was a little scary, like 10 to 12 years ago when I decided to do this. But I haven't looked back. And so when I said moving to the dark side before, like I actually do consider it moving to the dark side now. Every once in a while, there's a pull, because I think my archetype is a little bit COO-like also. I have a little bit of a COO, chief of staff flavor that partners with this really huge passion for people and culture. And I don't think that those things are necessarily that different, to be honest. We'll talk more about that. But I have stayed true to it.
Nice. That's good. Yeah. And it's good to, I guess whenever you come to that realization of finding what really motivates you and drives you, I think that's an exciting moment, and to double down on it is great. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, I don't think we need this slide yet, Tom, but let's talk a little bit about that transition. So, we talked a little bit about Bridgewater, and for those who know, Bridgewater is really interesting culture. We talk about that sort of radical candor, radical transparency. Sounds like you learned a lot of lessons there, and you stayed way longer than you thought you'd expected to. But not everything that works at an organization like that is going to work at an organization like Capitolis or another one. So what did you take from that? What did you not take? How did you leverage what you learned in those previous roles as you took on, really the challenge of building a culture from scratch for a new organization?
It's a great question. I'll tell you, when I spoke to all those CEOs during that period of time, I think many of them were worried, right? For someone who had been in such a strong culture for a period of time, are they married to that? Can they operate in different cultures? Those sorts of things. There was one woman on our executive team. I had gone through a series of interviews here at Capitolis. There was one woman on our executive team, and she was really scared that I was just going to come here and make this place, or try to make this place into Bridgewater, which we know is not possible. And I had to go for walks with her around the city, and we had a whole bunch of conversations. She was like, damn, I don't want to like her, but I do. So I kind of came from a backwards place. So of course, I did not come here and recreate the same culture. And of course, that's not possible, or even something that you would want to do. But I learned a lot at Bridgewater in those 8 years. I learned a lot about myself, for one, that I don't know if you expect to learn. It's kind of like becoming an executive coach. You're learning how to coach, but you're getting like 200 hours of coaching at the same time, and you emerge something better, I think, at the end. Bridgewater was very similar. So I learned a lot about myself. I think I became much more open-minded, a better listener, a whole host of other things that I think I had bigger challenges and probably still have challenges around today. But at least I'm going down that adult development path. But I did learn a lot about kind of that principled, systematized approach to driving culture. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to work alongside Ray Dalio and a whole host of others who were there at the time, who had done so much work to define a culture very clearly. And then, as many of you know, the harder part is actually keeping it alive. It's having that steady drumbeat, and we'll talk more about that as well. So taking the time to define the culture, like people always say, oh, you built the Capitolis culture. I certainly did not build it. I observed it. I defined it. I helped to lay out the standards around what good looks like in that space. And to be honest with you, we've built some systems around it, but we still have a long way to go. So even just thinking about speaking with you today, I've been kind of coming up with a whole host of ideas, and I'd love to hear from others too. So if there's ways that I can learn from this group, that would be great.
Yeah, that's great. So interesting, thinking about this systematized approach. So you're able to apply that to the new role of Capitolis. Is there, so thinking about, folks who might be moving into new organizations, or anyone on this call now who might go somewhere else, was there one thing that, you would just say, like, keep this in mind when you go into that new role, when you have that big opportunity to sort of, have your dream job and shape a company's culture? And what's one thing that you would say was a lesson learned that you would recommend everyone keeps in mind? And what's another thing you'd recommend, to keep an eye out for, or some potential risk?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing is that you're a student of that culture for a period of time. And you can read about it and you can talk about it, but until you really study it and you see how really are decisions made, how does that executive team meeting go? How do you hire people? What are the top employees like? How can you actually parse out the attributes of what a top employee is made of? And of course, there are many types of people, so there are probably many types of attributes. So that was one, which was really take the time to study it, and be very observant and open and listening. Even when we rolled something out, I worked with a colleague of mine named Emma Raggio. She was an amazing partner of mine. And we spent a lot of time speaking and testing and listening and bringing employees and leaders into the conversation. And by the way, it evolved a lot throughout that process. We'll talk a little bit about some of the attributes that we defined, and like some words work better in different cultures also when you're thinking about operating in different countries. So that's probably number one. We did also actually use one of our principles, which I actually have next to me. I got to grab one of these, but we both looked at ourselves and thought through what we thought was best. But we also really studied what others were doing. So one of our values is we learn from the best and are unapologetically independent. And we we had a lot of work and a lot of reading. I actually had an intern for a summer who was amazing, and we studied all of the greatest cultures that are written about in many places and learned from them as well. So it was kind of an internal exercise. It was an external exercise in bringing that all together. One last thing, which is maybe a softer thing, and it applies, I think, to like lessons that I have in general, are like, don't ignore your gut. If you have defined something, or you're going down a path, or you're making a decision and something is just not sitting right and you can't figure out what it is, it kind of doesn't matter that you can't figure out what it is. Just pause and unpack that thing. And I find that that works well with my team as well, right? If someone gets stuck on something and they're kind of at a roadblock and they can't figure out why, I mostly ask them, like, what's bugging you about this? And I think if you do that, including when you're working with culture and this sort of exercise, you're going to really get to kind of the meat and the juice that you have to unpack and work through in a good way.
Awesome. Yeah, and by the way, I'm sure the audience is wondering, what's that thing on Jen's desk that she was flipping through? So when we start talking about stuff, let's talk about some of the tools you use to bring the culture to life as well. So I think that'll be great.
Sure.
Yeah. So and I know you're familiar. We sat down with Kevin Oakes, our CEO, who wrote the book Culture Innovation, and we were all chatting about the 18 steps. And one of the things that he talks about in his book, kind of at the prologue of the book, is that culture needs to be owned or co-owned by the CEO and the CHRO, or the Chief People Officer. And so, you mentioned your CEO, and you mentioned that sort of once you met him, you knew that you shared similar values and that you'd want to work for this gentleman. Talk to us a little bit about that relationship. Talk to us about the CEO-CPO relationship. How's it worked for you? What are some things you've done to, sort of to make that work, and how has it helped you both create this help you on this culture journey with Capitolis?
Yeah. I think that simpatico with the CEO and the Chief People Officer is like the most important thing. And it's almost like you don't know it till you see it and experience it. And once you have, you can't go back. And I've had the opportunity to have that kind of relationship with a few people that I've worked for and with in my career. So I was lucky that I kind of knew what I was looking for. At least I knew what it felt like when I found it. And so, like I said a few minutes ago, when I first spoke with Gil, like I just knew, I could just tell within 5 to 10 minutes. And again, a lot of it is around values. He took the time to get to know me. We had very honest and open conversations. I could tell that the values even more broadly were aligned, and I was really excited about this company. And he was excited about what I could do to add value to this company. And that became pretty apparent pretty quickly. I remember when I was speaking with him about this job, I said, like, can you tell me about the job? Should I meet the team? And one of his answers was kind of like, I would like you to come in and figure that out. And some people are horrified by that, right? Like sometimes I do a lot of recruiting. People want that role spec to be very tightly defined. But to me, I thought, that is the right level. Like, this is great. So he was really, I knew, looking to me to come in and define this thing and tell him what this thing should look like, what this role should look like, what this value should look like. So I have mostly defined my responsibilities to be exactly what that reflection led to 12 years ago. So I work with him as his right-hand woman in many ways. There are other right-hand people. I'm a member of our executive team. It is not a HR thing. I'm part of the business, and I think we rely on one another. He is a gifted kind of genius, visionary strategist. He knows this industry, and he's also very wise about people, which is really helpful. So in some ways, I can smell out a situation, and he can rely on me to raise something to him. So this is probably what I learned at Bridgewater. Something happened, I don't know, in the last 5 or so years, and I just don't care anymore. I don't care about looking good. I don't care what people think. Sometimes I look super stupid, and I'm just like totally fine with that. And I think that comes with time and age and wisdom. But again, executive coaching, I'd love to like help people get there earlier. It's all about that acceleration. So I'm pretty good at perceiving problems. I'll call them out, and then I just set the table for a good conversation with the right people. And those things are around business, and he has a really good wisdom about that. Again, we're anchoring to kind of the same values and other things. And so we make a really good team.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I don't know if you saw, there was a little quote from Maya Rudolph recently. She just said, I don't know what happened in the last few years, but the don't give an F hormones kicked in. So maybe that's what happened for you too, Jen.
Maybe. I was going to swear, but I decided not to. So
Well, I'm from
I
Jersey.
normally do.
We're East Coasters. We want to, but we won't. We won't.
I'm holding back. Yeah, it's good. Like in my coaching business, there are themes that people struggle with, and I think this is a big one. And I wish I could like create a pill to give to people just so that I don't give an F pill. I think it's liberating.
Yes, if we can bottle that, life would be good for
Totally.
Although, yeah, I don't know if traffic getting into the Lincoln Tunnel would work out as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, no,
But
probably not.
anyway, so that's really great. And so I guess just one quick follow-up from him, and I think you answered the question. And then we're going to get into what kind of my favorite part, which is like, let's take a look at the work that you've done together. But you said your CEO had this interesting, or had a good sense for people and sort of the leadership side of things. Did he get culture and the impact that culture has on the business? Like, was that part of his story, or did you help educate him on that?
He inherently gets it.
Okay.
I don't know that actually he reads a lot of books. So it's possibly that he also has studied it too, a combination, but he just inherently understands that people and our way of operating and all of this just contributes in a pretty major way to our business success. I mean, I think he thinks that that's like right top of the list, as most of us on this call do. So
right. Fantastic.
I didn't have to convince him of it. He already knew.
Yeah. I mean, and I obviously as an advisor to many of our clients, sometimes we spend a lot of time convincing certain business leaders or CEOs convincing their teams that this is important, right? So it's always nice to get someone who's already sort of has joined that, or is a believer, and then you just need to give them kind of the tools and the expertise on how to make their vision come to life. Because I find that many business leaders just don't have the language of culture, just don't have the language of people. They understand operating margin, they understand profitability, they understand operations, but that language of culture is just not natural for many of them. So I think that's an important role to play.
Segueing kind of into the meat of the conversation, like the actual culture that we've documented. There are two parts of it, and this might be a good time to put up that slide.
Yeah, let's go.
On the left, you see the company values, and this is one of the things I was flipping through a minute ago. I'll show you some of the props that I have here. And again, I'm sure there are much better ways to do it and so many more ways to do it. So I just keep adding on to it. The company values they guide how we make decisions, how we operate, kind of our overall way of being. And these company values came straight from Gil's heart, like straight from the CEO's heart. You can imagine, and for folks that have done culture work, and I know that you guys do culture work as well, you see on the left, we're not going to go into these in detail. You can go to capitolis.com and you'll see our company values on our website. There are actually 9 different values on here, and we ended up pulling them into kind of like a duality statements, 2, 2, 2, and 2, and 2. So 5 of them. And so we kind of had to get 9 into 10 into 5. So it's always like a puzzle piece. So I think about culture in a lot of puzzle ways. We're looking for relationships. And so a lot of the work that we did, both on the values and the people attributes, which we'll discuss in more detail, like they kind of conflict with one another, right? As some of the best books and religions and a whole host of other things in the world do, there are different parts of the dimensions that actually conflict and make it more multidimensional. So the company values on the left-hand side came straight from him. And for example, I talked about one of them, which is on here. We learn from the best and are unapologetically independent, right? That's 2. Those are 2 different things. We're going to be really resourceful. We don't need to recreate that wheel. If there are people that have done it many times and it's gone well, let's leverage that. But also, we also have our own ideas. And so how do you bring those things together? And we've stated it that way in our company values. So I joke that we rolled the values out to the company, and I created, of course, a presentation, and I had a speaker's notes and the whole thing for the CEO. And he like rolled them up in a ball and just basically chucked them to the side within like 1 minute of starting. And it was amazing. So those are the company values, again, straight from his heart, through years of experience, not just at this company, but other companies that he has run and built himself as well. The people attributes are the other aspect of the culture, and these are more around how do we hire people? The thing that I was describing earlier, where we studied the top employees and what they're like. And so we're hiring against it. We're assessing people against it. We're using it to inform development. And you can almost imagine a whiteboard of like 100 or 200 words at one point. I have like a very visceral memory of this. And we started to kind of bucket them, and we started to chunk them together, because when you think of it, and I'm sure you've had this in the book that you have, and we've talked about this over lunch, I think, Marshall, like humans can only think of 3 to 5 things, right? You don't want to overwhelm them with a long list of things that are not going to be part of the day-to-day operating model. And so that's kind of the introduction to the people attributes, which I know we'll dive into a bit more.
Yeah. I mean, we can get right into it. I think you talked a little bit about how you got here, but just to recap and to see if you want to add anything, and then let's just dig into them on the next slide. But you said a little bit about, you did some observing, listening. You also mentioned that you looked at sort of what the best performers in your organization were doing, which I love hearing that as well. Anything else that like would be good hints or tips for folks about how to come to this? Because it's daunting. You're looking at an organization, you're trying to define in 1, 2, 3 word phrases what the company cares about, what you want people to do. That's not easy, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions. So any other great advice you have on how to get there?
Yeah, there was a lot of observing and listening, like I said, that big whiteboard, and then synthesizing into common buckets. So you can imagine we started to bundle things together. And once we had it kind of a working draft of this, we went out and basically did a roadshow, and not a roadshow in the way that we were speaking at people, a roadshow in the way that we were speaking with groups of like 10 to 12 employees at a time in all 3 markets. Words, as you know, and statements and phrases translate differently. And we listened and we iterated. And again, this morning I was thinking about this conversation, and I have a lot of thoughts about what I'd like to do next. So I'll show you some of the stuff I have on my desk, just so if I keep pulling it up, you'll wonder what the heck it is. We do have we had posters. I don't know that I never really loved these. So they're like a draft that I keep in my office, but we have like the people attributes on a poster, and we have the company values on a poster.
Right.
And this is kind of like, when people say, oh, you're going to develop it and put it up on the wall. That's what this is, right, to start. But I will say, I'm always tweaking this. And so when we meet, for example, when Gil and I meet an executive candidate, we spend as much time talking about what we didn't think was the right fit in that candidate as we do what was the right fit, because we're wrangling with this. And you'll notice there's like a little sticky on my board here, which says energy. And I have it under one of the components, because I think that thing that is so important to us, like that energy, like that can do, like the oomph behind it, I don't think we have captured that well.
Yeah.
And when we're assessing people, we're looking for that. So, if you meet someone, oh, hey, like the opposite of that. So we're always kind of refining and thinking about it. But I think this morning I was thinking, I think we should do it all again. Like I'm almost ready to just kind of fire it out, go back with employees, get their feedback after they've used it for a couple of years now, and refine it.
I love that. Yeah, because one of the things that our research shows is that you're never done with culture work. And you mentioned create energy. That's one of the Microsoft leadership behaviors they talk about, and that we admire their work. We've done case studies on them, and they always joke with us when they say, hey, stop talking about our culture, how great it is. We've got so much work to do, right? But it's the same thing. It's never perfect. It's never tweaking. Your business is changing and your needs may change. And I just want to say, so we got the slide up here, and I think for the audience here, I love obviously taking a look at attributes and values and things like that, but I particularly love what Jen and Gil and their organization came up with, because to me, it's super unique. It seems super aligned with your culture. And for me, it's a lot of fun too. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you came up with super smart, badass, good humans? Let's hear it.
Yeah. So these were kind of the buckets that emerged at the end of the day. And if we've got any folks on the phone from the UK, the word badass did not translate very well, but you see that it's still on here for now. And so we'll see if it continues to work. They were willing to take a try at it. So these three areas were kind of the three buckets that emerged. And by the way, you just made that Microsoft comparison. I have met other culture experts and looked at other company values and people attributes, and they often have similar buckets, right? One of my last employers may have had super smart, badass, and something else, right? There might be a third or two, or something is a little bit different. So it's going to be really unique for the company. But oftentimes you have something that kind of boils down to the top one is like an intellectual, what you know and how you think. The bottom left is like that oomph I was talking about before, like getting stuff done, taking the bull by the horns, like really standing up for what you think is right so we can be great together, right? It's a little bit more of the assertive aspect and the get stuff done aspect than the bottom right, which is good humans, which is a really nice balance to that. And that's more of like the collaboration, the listening, the continual growth and humility. And so it's multidimensional. I like it because so examples of how we've incorporated this, when we hire people in Greenhouse, our system that we use for hiring and capturing that data, we actually have ratings on not just these buckets, but the actual important attributes below it, which we'll talk about on the next slide or so. And so when people are interviewing, they're literally going down and clicking on, the thumbs down, the star, the thumbs up, whatever the thing is, and adding comments. So I like it for hiring a lot. And it doesn't mean that you have to be everything, by the way. It means that we're just really conscious around, even before someone starts, what are their superpowers? Like, where are they really strong? And where might they need to develop, or where might you need to complement the team around them because they might not be so strong? So I like it for hiring. I like it for giving feedback, and I love it for development. Because I bet if everyone on this call looked at this super smart, badass, good humans, once I define it for you, you'll be able to say like, oh, my number one is badass, my number two is super smart, and I'm not sure about this open thing. Like most people, right, can think about that. And so we do exercises sometimes during reviews where we have people first rank themselves, and we have really meaningful conversations about that. So it kind of blends that coaching passion and development passion that I have into this assessment design.
Well, yeah, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because we talked about sort of the power of 3 or 4, the power of, I call it the power of recall. You need to be able to remember these things. And I love what, just to bring this home for everyone, when Jen's talking about interviewing someone, or, let's just talk, you obviously know this stuff, but let's just think of someone, employee number 55 who's been working at the organization for 2 years, and you say, hey, I want you to go interview this candidate. In their head, they can remember smart, super smart, badass, and good humans. They're not going to forget it. They don't need it written on the wall because there aren't 20 of them. And also those words actually mean something, right? Like they can grok what super smart means, and they can see it in someone, right? And so to me, what I love that you did is it's fun, but it's also memorable, and it's also easy to understand, and that makes it just that much more useful every day. And I think that a lot of times people forget that part. Like we want these frameworks to be useful, and the more complicated or the more esoteric they are, the less useful they become. And so, talk to me a little bit about that. Did you have any versions of this that were sort of too theoretical, or didn't really, people couldn't remember?
This is kind of where, we did a ridiculous amount of work to hone it. And to be honest with you, when I made this deck for you guys a couple of days ago, I took some things out. Because we had more words, we had more descriptors. So like, for example, under get stuff done, which by the way, was me pulling back because it was supposed to be get shit done. So I was, trying to be, I went with badass. So I had to pull back on the GSD. So I think everyone knows what GSD is. I was a little more subtle there. But now you know the secret. For example, we had the word crusher. And like the word crusher is kind of like the word scrappy or relentless or operate with sense of it is like duplicative in some ways. And I was just on the phone yesterday. We take the time with, for example, search firms. If we're going to partner with a search firm on an important search, I'll take a half an hour with the firm, just me and them, and I will walk them through all of this stuff very carefully and take the time to do that. And the guy who I was on the phone with was like, oh yeah, like we use crusher. And I was like, man, I got to add it back in. Because it resonated with him and it meant something to him. So it's sometimes harder to shorten, right? There's so many comments on writing like it's easier to write a long novel than a short story. Like this is
Right.
kind of, you're always trying to hone it and make sure that you're really being streamlined around it so people can remember it and it's useful.
Right. When there's nothing left to take out, you're done, sort of thing, right? Or the Hemingway
Yeah.
example with the shortest story. So I think we chatted about this, not even when we were prepping for this conversation, but another time. Do you feel like this helps or hurts you from a recruiting perspective? Because I could look at this and be like, wow, I do not want to work there. Or I could look at this and be like, that looks like the place for me. Do you ever feel like there's a risk there that you might be, attracting or losing people because you've made such a bold statement?
Yeah, we actually love that. That's part of the goal. So when people look on our website, they see this, it's on the careers page, like right on the front of our careers page, and it will blow up and all these things. And so the fact that super smart, badass, good humans is like the top thing you see, and then you can dive in deeper as you're showing here on some of these slides. We're not for everyone. I mentioned that we still call ourselves a fintech startup. We've been around for 8 years and we're now maturing, but we hope to always have the entrepreneurial spirit. So someone that's kind of turned off before they even come to interview or apply for a job, I actually like that. I prefer that.
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
yeah, if we do a good job, then hopefully it will attract the people that we want to be here, that probabilistically, in a better way.
Yeah.
And I'm okay repelling the people that are not into this
All right. That's
earlier.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that
It
makes
starts
sense.
there.
That makes sense. Yeah. I thought that was the case as well, but I just wanted to sort of check it. So, you talked about the posters. I think every one of my webinars here, I make this same quote, but a lot of time people think that like once you've got this written down, you put the posters on the wall, the work is done. You and I know that that's actually when that was hard work, but now there's a lot of hard work because you need to actually activate the culture. So you shared a little bit about how you use this in interviewing processes and performance review, et cetera. What are some of the other strategies you've used to actually bring the culture to life and activate it in the real world day to day?
Yeah. So it's like I said, it starts on the website before you even engage with us, and hopefully through our search partners, our recruiters here that are talking about it in that same sort of way. And when people interview, quite frankly, we're giving them feedback. Like if I do a culture interview with somebody, I'm going to give them feedback in that interview and see how they react to it. And we're going to talk about this, feedback around where do I see some of their development areas and see how they navigate that and how they like that. So we do it right up front. When people get in, we set expectations for their jobs. They set development goals with their manager. But when folks are giving feedback throughout the year, we're anchoring to this. When we do reviews, we're anchoring to this. Development plans anchoring to this. And I'm just talking about HR stuff right now, right? It happens all the time, especially when if we're making a decision about a person, we're going to anchor to this. And oh, by the way, we're also going to anchor to the company values. Right? How should we think about making this decision? It's not unusual. I'll show you some of the stuff on my desk. So we have, these actually are, I didn't hang the posters yet, but I still might, I don't know. But we have these like kind of flip charts. Like these are the values on a flip chart. And my CEO will literally pick this thing up in his office and look at it as we make a big decision. He'll be like, are we doing this? How do you feel about this? And he'll go through all 5 of these slides and kind of check it with the group, right? So he's using it, he's testing it, they're getting educated simultaneously. The same holds true for people attributes. We've got that going on too. So we use it as much as possible. I'll tell you one of the areas where I'd like to use it more is in our business process around setting strategy and goals and then measuring against them. And that's one of the next phases is I'm meeting with our head of strategy who owns a lot of those areas and thinking like, how can we actually create explicit steps, processes, systems around this, our culture within those business processes. So I think there's so much more that we can do. And in some ways, we've just kind of touched the tip of the iceberg.
Jen, if I can jump in here. You mentioned business goals. One of the questions that just came in the chat from Karen is around goals, but at the sort of individual and maybe team performance level. So are these values and also the attributes, particularly the attributes, are they woven into your official performance management process?
They are. So we have expectation settings and there is feedback throughout the year. And there's actually, we do an annual review where people do a write-up and a development plan. And all of those pieces include this. So the development plan, for example, if you're looking at the slide in front of you, so let's see, Marshall, what's going on with you? I don't know which one it's going to be, but let's just say that, I don't know. You're not tough enough. You're not speaking up enough. You've got great opinions, but you're sharing with me in my office, and you're not sharing them with the right people.
I have this interest. I always want the team to get along, Jen. I don't want to upset anyone. That's
Okay,
my
good. So I'm guessing right. I was totally guessing. So like, I would say like super smart and good human, like maybe good humans, your superpower, super smart is like really up there also. And then like this badass thing, you can be a little tougher. So as your manager or as your peer, we're going to be talking about that. And how can we support you in doing that? And how can you do that differently? And how can we, whatever, get you a mentor that can help you with that or an example? So it's kind of incorporated in the entire talent life cycle. Did you have another question on the business goal thing?
Well, I think the other question was, do you actually tie it to comp? Like, are people rewarded based on any of these? That was also part of that question she had.
Yeah. So the expectation card, which is basically your role spec and the thing that you're striving for that year, includes, I think it's 10%. It may even be 15% of that is basically, are you a good culture citizen of the company? And that's going to include both the values and the attributes. So it is a piece of the conversation. But to be honest with you, if someone is not, it's not only worth 10 to 15%, obviously. And so much larger decisions can be made, feedback, development, and sometimes decisions can be made if someone's not the right fit. It kind of becomes an all or nothing at the end of the day. If you've gone through all those steps and the person just cannot evolve in those spaces where we need them to.
Got it. A couple other questions came up too. So someone's asking, or Deepa is asking, how do you ensure that these 3 core traits and the values are going to preserve and grow as the company grows? You know, maybe it's easy to get those handouts to 120 people, but you know, when you're 2,000 people, how are you going to do that? Have you thought about that challenge?
Yeah, so there's two ways to answer that. One is, are these entrepreneurial small company kind of things that need to evolve and change over time? And 2 is more of like the machine-like way of thinking. And so I'll start with the first one. So super smart, you saw in the definition a couple slides ago, for example, on quality thinking. We're looking for people at Capitolis right now who can see the forest through the trees, who can cut through to the heart of a matter, who can synthesize. And you might say, oh, maybe not everyone needs to do that so well. And of course, there are various different levels of people that need to do that well. And so on an executive team, it's super important. And maybe if you're an accountant, actually want you to be a little bit more detail oriented. And that's okay. But I do think over time, as we have more run machines and different ways of thinking and operating and scaling, that things will evolve for sure. So that's one. And then how do we go about doing it? Well, this company is by far the smallest company I've ever worked at. I started pretty large. MasterCard, believe it or not, when I was there, was only about 5,000 employees, and now is really large, but 5,000 even is significantly bigger than 120. Bridgewater was closing in on 2,000 when I was there. And so most of my career, I've operated at that kind of 20 or 30,000 foot level where I have figured out a program or a strategy or a process, and then had to waterfall that down through managers and leaders and others that become kind of experts and accountable for that. I have to say that the difference of coming to this company, and kind of fun, actually, it's like a really good reminder. It's like a little bit more hand-to-hand combat. You know, I'm actually in it. I'm in the conversations doing the thing, which is really good lesson for me to then, as we scope and scale, go back up to that place where we are at that level and building systems and machines that go down. I mean, obviously we're doing a little bit of both right now.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a luxury. You know, I actually could get to know almost every person in this company.
Right.
And so a lot of lessons come from that, and hopefully a lot of lessons that I'll take with me as we scope and scale and change.
Got it. Yeah. So, and by the way, you know, great example of a quality thinking. 2 ways to think about this problem, right? And you shared them with us. You laid them out for us, and then, you know, as if we were working in your organization, we could start to ponder those and figure out what's the right way for the company. Do we want to redo these values as we grow, or do we want to just scale them and create a machine. So yeah, I love, it's a great example of how you're living the behaviors and the attributes right there in front of us all. All right, so we're coming up close on time. I think you started to talk a little bit about what the next steps are in the journey for you all, but is there anything else that you want to share? And it sounds like even this process has gotten you thinking about it. So anything new when you're thinking about what's next in the next year or two in your culture journey?
Yeah, I do think I mentioned that I want to kind of bring it back to life. By the way, I went to our Israel office recently, and my of the three is probably this one. So they had these little books made. So they gave me a book, You Are a Badass. And they had all three stacks of whichever book it was that applied to you. And so we're always trying to kind of beat the drum. And we get it in onboarding as well. So we're going to continue to improve the processes that we have in place. I do think it's time to kind of take a step back and make sure that this is still right. There might be tweaks along the edges. Maybe there's an entirely new component that we haven't thought about. So I think it's time to do that. I mentioned building it into some of the more like the core business processes in the company. I think there's an opportunity to do that. And one thing that worked really well at Bridgewater that I haven't had as much success here with that I would like to try is showing what good looks like. Like when someone demonstrates something that is exactly aligned with the values or a people attribute or what have you, finding a way to really showcase that. I think it's like positive reinforcement and you're really giving kudos to that person, but B, it's so educational if you can get the right example. And on the converse, you often learn from things that don't go so well. And so I'd like to incorporate more of that learning, right? I have the benefit of sitting with the CEO and the executive team where we're using it all the time. So every time we test it, I'm learning and the people around me are learning. But to the last question, how do you take that learning and then like make sure that it's actually going across the organization? So I think there's much more to do there.
Awesome. Well, Jen, as expected, it was a great, fun conversation. So glad you could join us today. Thank you for all of your insights, and I hope the audience got a lot out of the conversation. Tom, I'll hand it off to you, and you can close us out.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Marshall. Great facilitation of the conversation with Jen, and thanks, Jen, so much. You shared some really wonderful insights. Different sort of company, being on the smaller, still startup side than some of our other guests, but we like to have that mix here at I4CP's Next Practices Weekly. Got a lot of great kudos and comments along the way. People really interested in some of the specific insights you shared. I'd like to encourage folks to connect with Jen on LinkedIn. Zeta has put her LinkedIn profile. So if you're willing, Jen, I think you'll get some new connections out of this. Great.
Absolutely.
Also want to remind folks that Next Practices Weekly is available for recertification credits. So if you were with us for this hour, and if you have a cert with either HRCI or SHRM, I know you're always interested in getting those recert credit hours. So just jot down the relevant program ID or activity ID that you see here on the screen or that Zeta has put in the chat, and you'll be all set there. Otherwise, thanks again, Marshall. Thanks again, Jen. Great conversation today, and we'll have everyone back for more great guests in the coming weeks. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.